Hello, everyone, and welcome to Black Kids in Outer Space. Today, we have a special guest. I'm going to actually start off today with a poem, Harlem by Langston Hughes. What happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? So we have welcome to Harlem's Carolyn. Carolyn Johnson, born and raised in Harlem, is the owner and president of Welcome to Harlem, a full service tour company operating since 2004. She says, I love where I live, and this is the main reason I started the company. Harlem presents on the world stage. Harlem present on the world stage is my passion, and I love showing it off. She provides custom tours, educational tours, and music programs, specializing in the rich cultural history of Harlem. And she's a graduate of City College of New York. So, welcome to the Black Kids in Outer Space show, Carolyn.
Hello.
So, I guess one of the first things I want to ask you is because it's a question I ask a lot of our guests. What is your first memory of space? Like, you're from Harlem, so what's one of your first memories of space? It could be outside, it could be taking the bus, taking the train, playing outside, it could be anything.
Just space in general. I'll probably say being outside playing, just
Yeah.
as a child. Having coming from a very large family with cousins all around and stuff like that, just always being outside and playing would probably be my first memory of space in and of itself. Yes.
No, I mean, I think it's kind of interesting that that's a lot of people's first memory of space. It's just being outside and playing with their brothers and sisters or people in the neighborhood. And we kind of have this kind of idea of space where it's about commerce and about, getting from point A to point B, when a lot of times our first memories of space is just having fun and being out there and just all that. So growing up in Harlem, what do you remember about Harlem?
Well, I always remember Harlem as being a community that's always been open and welcoming. I was born in the 60s. So it wasn't until like maybe 67, 68 where we really started to see a change in the community, but it always still had that love and commitment to one another and stuff like that. And you can go into different pockets of Harlem at that time period and see different things. So
Mm-hmm.
depending on where you were is what you saw, because me being in Central Harlem and then going over to West Harlem where my mother worked at Columbia University were two totally different worlds, even though they
Mm-hmm.
were in the community and stuff like that. So I really got to see both sides of the fence growing up as far as being inside of Harlem and stuff. So it was a really interesting situation at best, because some people never left Central Harlem. They figured that was their whole world and stuff like that. As they say, some people live within a 10-block radius. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I moved around a lot in the city with my mother because she always took us out on the weekends downtown and the places like that. So I think I was just fortunate in that sense to know that the world was bigger than what we were just seeing as far as living in Harlem.
I have a question in regards to, you said Central Harlem and West Harlem. Now, a lot of people are watching this show, nationally. What's the difference? Because growing up in Los Angeles, I just thought Harlem. I thought it was just one place.
No, 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 no. Harlem is three distinct neighborhoods: Central Harlem, East Harlem, and West Harlem. Now, when Harlem was first created in 1658, we started out in the area known as East Harlem today. That's
Mm-hmm.
where the settlers settled in 1658 when Peter Stuyvesant had granted them permission to come up here. And they
Mm-hmm.
came up here as farmers. So they was around 121st Street and First Avenue coexisting with Native American Indians. Now, East Harlem starts on 96th Street, goes all the way up to 142nd Street from Fifth Avenue over to the East River. It also incorporates West Harlem. It also incorporates Randall's Island and Ward's Island. In in 1937, when the railroad came up here, the area was known as Italian Harlem for many years. Then in 1919, at the end of World War One, that's when Harlem really changed as a community. East Harlem became known as basically Spanish Harlem El Barrio, because you had a large influx of Puerto Ricans moving to the area because they had fought in World War One. Then inside
Mm-hmm.
of Harlem, where most people think of Harlem, you had African American soldiers coming home into Central Harlem.
Mm-hmm.
So, all these different dynamics going on at the same time. And then you have West Harlem that has Columbia University, St. John Divine, Riverside Church, all of that stuff resides in West Harlem. But Harlem is three distinct neighborhoods and
Okay.
has its own personality, which is really nice.
I have a question. A lot of times I'll hear I got this one I was looking at this one magazine and they were talking about Harlem and they said they just called it Upper Manhattan. And I've heard it called that and I'm like, is that a thing? Is Upper Manhattan, is that also part of Harlem? Is that the same thing? What is that?
Well, Manhattan, unfortunately, people don't realize the dynamics here. Harlem literally sits in the middle of Manhattan. That's number one.
Okay.
Upper Manhattan would be more considered Washington Heights and Inwood
Okay.
versus Harlem. But Harlem is not considered Upper Manhattan. It would be more so Washington Heights and Inwood are considered Upper Manhattan.
Okay, so that's not like a thing. So when people are calling like or higher, or somebody said higher Manhattan, I was like, what is that? It's like so that's not like okay. Just to kind of clarify,
Neighborhood over us, that'd be Washington Heights and Inwood.
Washington Heights and Inwood. Okay, all right. That's good to know. So why, you know, I'm going to ask before I ask you about Welcome to Harlem. What do you think people should know about Harlem who aren't from Harlem? We think they should know about your area or your neighborhood that they don't know, or they just kind of like assume.
Right. So the fact that I do these tours, I get to see a lot of foreigners and Americans that come here, and the perception that they have of Harlem is I've seen it in TV, in movies, and that's what they expect Harlem to be when they get here. And once they get here and realize, I can actually live here. This is a beautiful community. We have the largest amount of 19th and 20th century architecture is embedded in our community because for so many years, a lot of our properties were boarded up and abandoned. But now, within like the last 25 years, a lot of these homes have been refurbished and stuff like that. And whites are the majority in Harlem today.
Mm-hmm.
Would be surprised with all of the development of the real estate. You had whites moving into Central Harlem where before they really weren't living as much, and whites are literally the majority in Harlem today. So Harlem has always been a racially diverse community from day one, and every ethnic group that you can think about is actually probably living here inside of Harlem.
Okay. And what about West Harlem? Has that always been a more because of Columbia University? Has that always been more of a mixed neighborhood, or has it always been? Has it considered itself part of Harlem, West Harlem?
For many years, they would always say, we live above like the Upper West Side, and we're in Morningside Heights. We'd be like, okay, what neighborhood is Morningside Heights in? And they would whisper like Harlem. It's now they're screaming into the top of their lungs. They're
Yeah.
proud to be from Harlem, but oh no, we're in Morningside Heights. Like it was like this different entity. Be like, no, that's Harlem.
Yeah.
But they're building a whole second campus over there. They're expanding and stuff like that, and they're proud to be screaming, "Oh no, we're in West Harlem now." Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
Things have
Yeah.
changed.
Well, it seems like things have changed. So, when you started Welcome to Harlem, was there anything like it? Because it's a walking tour. Kind of give people a little feel of what Welcome to Harlem is.
Right. I started Welcome to Harlem because I was starting to see other tour companies come up here doing tours within the community, and the information that they were giving out wasn't correct. So I was like, if information is going to be given out about my community, why not start my own company and stuff like that? So we started out doing walking tours in the community to make sure that the people were getting accurate information versus people coming up here reading off of pieces of paper and trying to tell us what was in our own community and not even being accurate or true by no stretch of the imagination.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, why did you pick the places that you picked in regards to you picked the Apollo Theater, you picked, why did you pick these things?
Well, Harlem has a million different stories that can be told, and actually, we are the largest neighborhood on the island of Manhattan. We go
Mm-hmm.
river 16 blocks straight across, and we have a lot of territory to cover. So depending on the theme of what somebody might want to see or do, you would go to that particular neighborhood. But to me, the Apollo Theater is like Carnegie Hall.
Mm-hmm.
When it
Mm-hmm.
comes to Harlem, has to make it their business to go to the Apollo Theater. If they don't have the ability to go all the way into the theater, if it might be close, but just to see the outside of it and the beauty of this institution that has been there since 1934, entertaining the world. And I try to incorporate landmarks as far as cultural, churches, even buildings where people of importance might have lived in and stuff like that whenever I do my tours so they can get a full understanding of how this neighborhood has blended and become this very interesting entity as far as people coming to see. But I mean, there's not a city block that you can walk around here in Harlem that there's not a story to be told on it by no stretch of the imagination.
Well, I noticed just even walking around I went to the Calabar imports, and I noticed you have Frederick Douglass Frederick Douglass Circle, or is it street? How, I mean,
Yeah,
how did that come about being? Because I mean, I know every black neighborhood we have a King Boulevard. Some of the
yes.
more progressive ones have a Malcolm X Boulevard, but I've never really seen a Frederick Douglass Boulevard. How did that come about?
We have, when you come into Harlem, a lot of our streets and avenues will change names to honor individuals that have a connection to our community or and stuff like that. So, Frederick Douglass Boulevard, which turns from Central Park into Harlem. Once it comes to Harlem, it turns into Frederick Douglass Boulevard at 110th Street when Central Park is ending, and there's a beautiful statue of Frederick Douglass right there. The
Hmm.
next avenue would be 7th Avenue downtown, but in Harlem, that is known as Adam Clayton Powell Jr. Boulevard to honor
Hmm.
the first African American congressman in the Northeast. And then you go another avenue over, and if you were downtown, it would be Avenues of the Americas and 6th Avenue, but in Harlem, it's known as Malcolm X Boulevard and Lenox Avenue.
Hmm.
25th Street is Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard all the way across river to river. Yeah, so no, we have them all here, and we were kind of running out of streets and avenues, so we named the park after Marcus Garvey and stuff like that. So we most definitely do honor our individuals here, and as you go farther uptown, you have streets named after Duke Ellington, Langston Hughes, Richard Wright. I mean, we do honor the people here, and not just African Americans. You have Tito Puente Way and stuff like that. There are, so we do honor individuals. Samuel Battle, which was the first African American captain in the police department and stuff. So yeah, we're all over the map as far as honoring people here, which is very important to us.
No, it's like that's the thing. It's just so like wonderful. I mean, the thing is that every time anybody who's black who's in the arts, we kind of all I have to say, kind of like tip our hat to Harlem or think about the Harlem Renaissance, even though there were Harlem kind. I want to say there were Harlem Renaissance. You see, I even label black in the 1920s the Harlem Renaissance. There were Harlem Renaissances all over the United States, but as you see, we still call it Harlem Renaissance as an example of what we want to achieve. So, in
Mhm.
regards to the Harlem Renaissance, do you feel that it's jazz, art, or poetry gives you the best feeling of Harlem for
Mm,
you? I know it's a hard
mm.
question.
Sure, that's a tricky one. Because all of them have played an important role in making Harlem what it is today. I think I would probably have to say jazz music. I think when really people think about that and stuff like that as being the main entity and stuff, because you have to remember you had the Harlem Hellfighters coming home, the 369 Regiment, and they actually took jazz to Europe when they went over there to fight. And I think that's what really awoke in the world to Harlem as being a place that where African Americans lived and stuff like that. The fact that they took this form of music over there and they really had a chance to rub elbows with African Americans for the first time, I think the world was awakened to us. And that was just a tipping point for the Harlem Renaissance to jump off because these people have traveled the world now. They've been exposed to different things. Everything wasn't about race and stuff like that. And they realized, wait a minute, we are equal just like everybody else. And I think that just really awoken our spirit as a people here. inside of Harlem. People were trying to make their way here to Harlem, even though you could have gone to Chicago and Detroit and other places and stuff like that. But I think everybody was just gravitating here because of that. We had some of the best writers, actors, entertainers, and musicians, living here during that time period and stuff like that. That were really making a mark.
Well, that's the whole thing. I think that's it's the music, the writing. It to me, it's just something that if you're into the arts or into African American culture, especially specifically like African American culture, you really kind of think of Harlem. But
Mm-hmm.
there are people from all over Black America, not Black America, they're from all over the world. Like you have like Marcus Garvey, and you have a strong Caribbean and African, I guess, feel in Harlem too. I mean, correct?
Most definitely, most definitely. I mean, it wasn't just exclusive to African Americans, as we know them to be native to our country. You had people from all of the islands that migrated here and
Mm-hmm.
stuff that put their stamp and made their mark here inside of Harlem. And I think, like I said, that we were just fortunate to be that focal point that people wanted to come here and stuff. It was just a lucky choice of the coin and stuff like that with us being. It really was. I mean, it could have been anywhere. It could have been Detroit. It could have been Chicago and stuff like that. But we
Mm-hmm.
just, the coin toss. So yeah. And
And
I
this,
mean,
go ahead.
the Schomburg is here too. I think that's also another plus for us having that institution here and stuff. With that being a repository for all of this magnificent materials and stuff like that. That people come from all around the world to do research about our culture and stuff. And they just recently acquired some chapters of Malcolm X's book that went up to auction. They recently got some of the chapters that were never published and stuff. So we're always getting the material here, and they're always putting on wonderful exhibits and stuff like that. So yeah, we're a lucky lot.
No, you have to have a lot. I mean, and also I mean, I don't know how much you know about El Barrio,
Mhm.
the eastern part of Harlem, and I mean, I find that really kind of fascinating. Does your tour ever go to that part of Harlem or?
Sure, we have some tours that go into East Harlem. East Harlem is not as aesthetically pretty as Central Harlem because East Harlem was much more factory oriented, and also you had a large a 20-block radius that Robert Moses, who was the architect of New York City, tore down and put up public housing. But once you get past Lexington and Third Avenue, you can go into East Harlem and find these charming brownstones and older homes that are colored in these beautiful pinks and blues and greens. But you have to remember, it was also known as Italian Harlem for many years around Pleasant Avenue and First Avenue and stuff like that. So you can still find these pockets of where you have Italian people living over there, the restaurants, the bakeries, and all of that stuff, the old barbers that are over there. And then you walk a couple of more blocks over, then you're into the full blown East Harlem spirit, and it's not just Puerto Ricans anymore. It's all type of, Hispanic culture that's also, and it also has a very good Caribbean flavor over there inside of East Harlem. And the fact that you still have La Marqueta over there, you go over there on the weekends and you better be ready to get your merengue on and salsa because out there in full force. Grandma got the little carts with the food, and I mean, it's just like a totally different world. And I mean, as you walk from east to west, you really get a different sense and flavor of the different ethnic groups that live here in Harlem. If you go all the way across, you get a little bit of Italian, then you get a little Caribbean, you get a little bit of Spanish, then you get African American, and then you might get some more Italian, then you might get African as far as Senegalese and Ghana and stuff like that. So the farther you go over, you have all these different flavors that just run across Harlem until you get over into West Harlem and stuff like that.
Until you get to West Harlem, what's there?
Over there too, you have a lot of Caribbean and African restaurants and stuff like that, but it just becomes a little bit, I guess, more traditional, where what you might see on the Upper West Side and stuff like that.
Okay.
But as far as diversity goes in food, you name it, it's here inside of Harlem. It's most definitely here.
So how has gentrification impacted Harlem in regards to just, people being able to live there still and be able to thrive there still and the culture just still being there?
Well, I can it's not so much like gentrification is just more new people moving into a neighborhood. You have to remember, a lot of our housing stock for many years was vacant or non-existent. We had a lot of vacant lots. So with them doing new development here, you had many more white people moving into the community. And New York City has laws about rent control, rent stabilizing, free market. So it's not like they were just literally tossing people out of buildings and uprooting them. You can't do that here in New York City by no stretch of the imagination. As long as people pay their rent, their housing is their housing and stuff like that. But you did have a larger influx of whites moving into Central Harlem and stuff like that. And I mean, for the most part, a lot of them liked what was here, and they weren't trying to change our community and stuff like that. They're also doing a lot of pushback because Harlem is a low-rise village. A lot of our buildings are like maybe 7, 8 stories at most and stuff like that. So we don't have these tall skyscrapers like they have on the Upper East Side. And that's things that we like. As we walk the streets here in Harlem, you can actually see the sky, and the sun is beaming all up and down on you as you walk around. And we like that feeling. And we have the much wider streets and avenues up here, so we're not so tight and congested as they are downtown. And people notice that when they come up here, and people's like, yeah, we like it like this. When people come out their doors, they talk to each other and stuff like that. You really know each other as you walk around the neighborhood. It's like a village. You really do know your neighbors up here.
No, I think that's something that's, that's very interesting, because I know even in a lot of places we were talking about the numbers of African Americans going down. But I know that in a lot of neighborhoods, our communities were kind of empty. We're only 10% of the population across the United States. So I know in a lot of urban centers where it seemed like our numbers were dropping, like in San Francisco, the numbers are dropping. But I know in some places, after various rebellions, places emptied out. And so then you had a lot of spaces that were kind of empty. So then at different times, then people kind of moved back in and kind of filled back out. And maybe in some places the numbers did not change as much. Right. But there's I know we're having a conversation about Harlem and touring. So we'll talk about that another day. So I know the Harlem Renaissance started approximately in 1918. So it's like 100-year time where this is like we're coming on the 100th birthday. I mean, depending on when you think it started. Are there anything going on to kind of commemorate that, the Harlem Renaissance in Harlem?
Yeah, the kickoff is actually going to be next year. There are several organizations that are putting things together in regards to making that a big blowout for us, because that's going to be our centennial. So you have like the Harlem Chamber of Commerce and other organizations that are gearing up now for that. And also, you also have the Black Woodstock that's going to be 50 years next year. That was a festival that was done in Marcus Garvey Park for about 4 or 5 weekends, where you had the Nina Simone, Jimi Hendrix, the Ozzy Brothers, Stevie Wonders. All of these guys were here July and August having the Black Woodstock in the park, and that's going to be the 50th year anniversary next year for that. So it's going to be jumping up here in Harlem next year for sure, with all the different things to honor the centennial and the 50th year of that.
So is the Black Woodstock like the other? Is it like the other Woodstock where everybody claims they were there? They weren't actually there.
I don't know, but I mean, like I said, we were getting down. I mean, if people Google it, they'll be utterly surprised who was here and stuff like that. It was like for 5 or 6 weekends, and that would be the 50th year anniversary of that. So that should be interesting too.
No, that's going to be amazing, because I had no idea about that. So thanks for that information. So how can people, if they want to contact you or, participate in one of these tours, what would they do?
Well, they can always just go to the website, welcometoharlem.com. They'll see a description of the tours that we have there. They can sign up for them. We also do custom tours. If they want to bring in the school group, senior citizens, all of that stuff, family reunions, we do the full gamut and stuff like that. And we tour in Harlem, but we also tour New York City in general. So it's not like we're just stuck here inside of Harlem as far as moving people around the city and stuff like that. But I just think people need to have an open mind when they get here. And like I said, they'll be pleasantly surprised as to what is here and what they see and what they can do. we're one of the few neighborhoods that are totally self-contained. We don't have to go anywhere to be entertained.
Mm-hmm.
Everything here, theater, opera, jazz, you name it, it's here. We have 10 beautiful parks here and stuff like that. People just think of the Apollo Theater, but we have other venues here that also put on wonderful performances and stuff like that. We have world-class museums here inside of Harlem and stuff. So there's something always to do here for free.
Mm-hmm. And also, people who are watching Black Kids in Outer Space, Carolyn has generously donated some tours for people who join Black Kids in Outer Space, of course, at the $15 membership level. So, so that's another way you can enjoy her tour, and you can help Black Kids in Outer Space interview even more awesome people like Carolyn. So, Carolyn, thank you so much for coming on the Black Kids in Outer Space show. Is there anything specific that we should know about that's happening immediately?
Well, right now, we call it Harlem Week, but it's really the whole month of August. We are partying here like crazy. There's always something going on. It started out as a week, but literally goes the whole month of August and stuff like that. Peabo Bryson was here this weekend performing, so we have world-class entertainers here performing inside of our parks and venues and stuff like that. So yeah, but go and look up Harlem Week 2018 and make your way to Harlem.
All right. Well, thank you all those people who are listening out there. And thank you, Carolyn, for coming on the Black Kids in Outer Space show. We appreciate you.
Thank you. Take care.
All righty.